This is breaking news. Gregg Popovich has now officially announced that he's stepping down as the head coach of the San Antonio Spurs. He just released this message. While my love and passion for the game remain, I've decided it's time to step away as head coach. I'm forever grateful to the wonderful players, coaches, staff, and fans who allowed me to serve them as the Spurs head coach, and I'm excited for the opportunity to continue to support the organization, community, and city that are so meaningful to me. They're saying now that Popovich will serve as the president of basketball operations for the Spurs. I have no idea what that role is, or is this just some cushy title they've given him as a consultant? I really hope it's just a cushy title they've given him as a consultant and he doesn't really have that much influence anymore, because I felt his ego is too strong for him to allow to change and adapt to just the changing climate of the NBA. That he has his set ways, and that's always been a weakness of him, despite you could say the greatness that he perceives to have had in the past. Um, but this is a big deal because Gregg Popovich, I think if you include this season, had been the coach of the Spurs for close to 30 years, nearly 30 years, because I remember when he first stepped in as coach, it was during the 96, 97 season, right as Dave Robinson had gotten injured and was out for a significant amount of time, which caused their record to plummet. And we know that story led to them getting Tim Duncan, but that was the first year he had taken over as coach of the Spurs. Initially, he was the interim coach, but once the Spurs got the number one pick, obviously he decided to make himself the permanent head coach when he was also the GM at the time. So you could say that was an ego move because he knew that Tim Duncan was going to be special. And obviously he was right. That was a move that greatly benefited him. What I do find interesting, even with Tim Duncan during the early years, he was always on the hot seat early on in his career. I remember during the first season where they won their first championship during the lockout season, as a Spurs fan, the Spurs started off terrible. I think they might have had like a sub 500 record, something like 6-8. And Gregg Popovich was on the verge of getting fired. And he knew he was going to get fired if they didn't win a national televised game on a Sunday on NBC, which was against the Houston Rockets that year. That it was that close that if they didn't win that game, they were going to fire him. And I remember he had told, I believe, David Robinson and Avery Johnson just a day or two prior to that game that he was on the verge of getting fired if they didn't win. And so what happened was that Robinson and Avery rallied the team and they were able to win that game. I think they won that game barely. I think they won it off of like a Mario Ellie three-pointer that got them to win the game, but it was that close. So think about it. If Ellie does not hit that shot, Popovich is fired and he's not the coach of the Spurs, which could have changed history by a lot, to be honest. Granted, I do think coaching is overrated in the NBA, but one valuable contribution I think Popovich did for the Spurs was having a father-son type of relationship with Tim Duncan, in the sense that Tim was on the verge of leaving the Spurs back in the summer of 2000 as a free agent to Orlando Magic, but it was because that strong bond with Gregg Popovich and Dave Robinson that it swayed him to stay, even when things did not look like it was on the up and up with the Spurs. They had an aging core, and it didn't look like they were going to win a title anytime soon, but it was good enough to convince Duncan that he trusted those two to stay, and obviously it paid off for him and the organization, but it could have been different if Popovich wasn't the coach. He might have just left without any emotional connection. So I would say that was probably the biggest contribution he ever made to the organization, was being able to convince Tim Duncan to stay. So that to me was huge. And I know some people will say, well, it was David Robinson. But even if you say that, it was Popovich who told Robinson to go meet up with Tim Duncan when Robinson was in Hawaii during that summer for his summer vacation. And Robinson cut it short just to meet up with Tim Duncan. So Popovich was behind Tim Duncan staying. So he always gets credit in that regard for me, being able to secure and keep him. But this is going to be an interesting transition, I would say. It's definitely a mark of a new era. I thought drafting Victor a few years ago really was the sign of a new era because, Tim Duncan had retired in 2016, and And after that, there was just a great malaise of nothing going on for those next several years with, Kawhi taking the organization and then drafting Victor. I felt took them into a new era where they could finally move on post Kawhi and even post Duncan's retirement and just transition themselves into a new period. And I felt Popovich was the only remnant from like the old guard, and now he's gone. And I think this officially marks the start of a new era. Now with them replacing him with Mitchell Johnson as the head coach. And how do I feel about Mitchell Johnson? I have no issues with that. He already has a relationship with Victor and Stephon Castle, who are the future of the organization. Those are building blocks. So he's already established a relationship. So why not keep it going? They did well underneath him when they were at full strength. Do I think he could be a great coach? I'm not sure. But then again, I've always said coaching in the NBA really has to do with the talent around you. So we'll see how well he does with the talent he has, to be honest. But I have no problems with it because I think in a lot of cases you need to have like that coach that can build up a team while they get ready to become a contender. And maybe he's that guy. You had that with the Chicago Bulls during the late 80s with Doug Collins, that he built them up to a point. And once they were at that point, he couldn't take them any further, and they hired Phil Jackson. You could say the same thing with the Lakers during the mid to late 90s with Del Harris, that he built up that team to a point where they started winning a ton of games, and they were consistently winning around 57 to 60 games, but he couldn't take them to the next level to be champions, and that's where Phil Jackson stepped in. So we'll see if Mitch is a long-term coach like Popovich, or is he just a bridge coach like a Doug Collins or a Del Harris. That'll be interesting to see, but we could all say that today officially marks the start of a new era in Spurs history. This will be exciting to see. So that's all I had to say as a Spurs fan.